Sonam ma'am, if you go heads on, we can start with the session.
Yes, we can start. Yes, definitely.
Good evening, everyone, and I welcome you all. I'm Shri Swapnil Kolte, the Vice Chairman at the Thane branch, and I welcome you all to this 11th series of our concept coined by the Shri Shiv Bhagwan Asava, the Chairman of the Thane branch, Vocal for Local, where we do encourage all the local speakers to share the knowledge on this platform, which will help us to grow together. The Vocal Series 11 was a very unique one where we were concentrating more on the NDS. With the growing importance of NDS, a lot of us do not possess a detailed knowledge of these, and these sessions and these learned speakers help us to have a great learning about these small topics, which will help us in our professional practice. Speaking about today's speaker is C.A. Sonam Kaku, who is qualified as a chartered accountant, a company secretary, and has also completed her diploma in IFRS, ACCA from ACCA UK. She's a senior manager with Deloitte with having an experience of approximately a decade. She's mainly concentrating on the sectors like engineering and construction, real estate, financial services, and manufacturing. She has also handled large accounts that have adopted IFRS and Ind AS and has been a key player in transition to IFRS and Ind AS. She has been involved in the preparation of IRS's memos on relevant gap differences and audit and assisted clients in identifying the transition exemptions and exceptions under AS1. She has also carried out preparations of IFRS standalone and consolidated balance sheets along with applicable disclosure. She has led the advisory stream and project management for demerger project of leading global telecommunication company into tower business and handled areas of accounting, data migration, process and control alignment. Very dynamic and engagement to various sectors, global markets spread across European markets. This was a small and brief introduction of our today's speaker. And without any further ado, I request today's speaker to take the session from here onward. Before moving ahead, I would also request all the participants to kindly post their queries into the chat box, which would be eventually taken by the speaker at the end or during the session as per their convenience. Thank you so much, and I wish you all a happy learning. Sonam ma'am.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Swapnil sir, for this lovely introduction that you have given about me. Uh, I thank everyone who have joined today on a Sunday evening discussing on the topic of India's 103. Uh, to just give you a brief background, in today's session, we're going to discuss about various business combination aspects related to accounting, disclosures, and various matters that needs clarifications. Uh, so now, as a business combination, we are all aware that's a key source of non-organic growth for many entities in India and globally. With few exceptions, India's 103 covers majorly all the business combination related accounting and disclosure requirements. Now, if we look back to accounting standard AS 14, which was the earlier IGAP, we had accounting for amalgamations alone, wherein there were two methods. One was the pooling of interest method, and the other was this purchase method, where we, accounted as uh, book value and the fair value accounting. And goodwill is amortized over 5 years, maximum 5 years. So this was about the IGAP. Now coming to the Ind AS, which is quite different. So let's move on to the. I'm sorry, my screen is stuck. Yeah. So so today we'll be discussing on whom is the Ind AS 103 applicable, its scope, the concept of business, which is very essential to for the accounting purpose, and then the method prescribed is the acquisition method under Ind AS 103, and common control business combination, what are reverse acquisitions, and lastly the disclosures. So coming to the applicability and scope, now so basically business combination wherein this standard covers from the acquirer or the transferee perspective. So uh, and it's applicable to companies whom the Ind AS applies. Now, Ind AS rules have clearly given the criteria based on the net worth and the subsidiaries, group companies to whom the Ind AS applied. So it's right from 2016-17 when the provisions were applicable to the for the respective companies, the particular standard has become applicable. Now, the one which are covered, the business combinations which are covered in the standard are particularly the, say, transfer of any particular business from one company to another, or say acquisition by way of share purchase. Now, here, a point to be noted is when this acquisition of share purchase takes place, the accounting prescribed in the standard is based on the for the consolidated financials. For the standalone financials, the reference is drawn to Ind AS 27, which accounts on, say, deemed cost or whatever is chosen. Then coming to the amalgamation or merger. Now, in amalgamation or merger, both the accounting references are provided for standalone and consolidated financial statements. And then common control business combination. Common control reference is basically entities, the combining entities which have a common parent before and after the business combination, and the control is not transitory. Now, so to start with the control definition, I've explained it in detail later on, so we will discuss that. Now, out of scope would be something which is formation of joint venture in the financial statements of joint arrangement. So basically, if we consider two companies combining and having a joint venture, a third company. So the third company, which is a joint arrangement, for that particular company, the Ind AS 103 doesn't apply. But for consolidation into the individual companies who have created the joint venture, 103 will apply. Then coming to the acquisition of assets and group of assets which do not constitute a business. Now here in this standard, the definition of business plays a key role in determining whether the accounting will fall under this standard or it will be called as an asset acquisition. Accordingly, the accounting would be carried out. The lastly is acquisition by investment entity in subsidiary. This is taken care by Ind AS 110, where it is transferred as fair value through P&L. Now coming to the concept of business, which I said is really essential in determining the accounting. Now, the main criteria here is the standard asks that the set of activities or the assets and liabilities which are taken over should basically have the input and substantive processes which result in an output. Now, inputs can be economic resources, the employees, materials, right of use assets, non-current assets, all those. And then substantive process. The word substantive here is a recent amendment 2020 April, which says that substantive is nothing but a process which is able to convert the input into a relevant output. So, and these processes do not include any administrative services like accounting, billing, or something like that. So it has to be something which generates income, that is the output by way of dividend or interest. So it's not necessary to have a output. So a company can be in a development stage and it has inputs and substantive processes, then again it can be classified as a business. So the standard also prescribes a optional concentration test for election of the transaction or event. If there are any questions, do let me know. We can pick it up at the end so that we do not miss the flow. I request everyone to put it on the chat box. I will take it up one by one later on at the end. Coming to this optional concentration test, which is an option for each and every transaction or an event. So it's basically identifying the concentration of fair value on each of the group of assets that is taking place. So based if that particular election is taken, is opted, and plus the it meets and the fair value is concentrated for a group of assets, then the whole transaction is classified as an asset acquisition. If suppose it doesn't meet, or the company has opted not to go for that option for the concentration test evaluation, then the whole process of evaluation of the inputs, process and outputs has to be done. Now, it's not necessary that for a business combination that all the inputs and process are transferred. It can be any business. Secondly, it has to have the capability to be managed as a business and may not necessarily be managed in current situation. And if there is a goodwill present in the assets which are taken over, then definitely it is presumed that it is a business. Now, one more criteria to evaluate is if another market participant is ready to understand that this is entire business and it can take it over, then it can be considered as a business. Coming to a case study on whether this is a business. Uh, Say company S is a manufacturing company, and its payroll accounting system is managed as a separate cost center which supports all the operating segments and the head office functions. Company A agrees to acquire the assets, liabilities, workforce of the operating segments of Company S, but does not require payroll and accounting cost center or any head office function. Does A need to apply the provisions of Ind AS 103? Please put in your answers in the chat box. Do you think it is this particular scenario would be covered in Ind AS 103? I think it's a pretty straightforward answer. Definitely. Yes. So the acquisition is a business combination because the assets are taken over, which are the segments which are capable of being managed as business. Now, payroll and accounting, as we just discussed, it's an administrative part, and even if it is not considered as part of transfer, that doesn't affect the whole business. So we move to the next. Now let's move on to the steps of accounting for accounting under the acquisition method. Now the steps involved here would be identify the business combination based on the definition of business that we just discussed. The second is the identify the acquirer. Determine the acquisition date, the date where the control has actually been transferred of all the assets and liabilities. How do you record the fourth step being the how do you record the assets and liabilities that are taken over? And is there any non-controlling interest and how is it recorded? That is taken care in step 5. Step 6 is the consideration which is transferred, and the last being the goodwill or a bargain purchase, whether it should be recorded or not. Coming to the first step, which is I think there's some problem. My screen isn't visible to everyone. Is my screen visible? Okay, I think there was some issue. So the first step being the identify the business combination. Now, the definition is states that what is business combination is a transaction or an event in which an acquirer obtains control over one or more businesses. Now, what is control is defined under Ind AS 110, which is consolidated financials, which says that an investor or the acquirer has control over the investee if and only it has all these conditions, which is power over the investee. Power here means has the ability to control the relevant activities meaning the ones which result in investor returns. So has the right to control the relevant activities and exposure right to variable returns in from its involvement with the investee, such that it engages in the activities or gets involved in the activities of investee, ensure that investor returns in form of dividend or interest, whatever is the case, are has the ability to affect those returns, increase or as the case may be, right? So basically, business combination evaluation is the first step and the most crucial step here, because once you determine that it is a business combination, then only the accounting standard applies. If suppose it, the criteria of determining whether the control is met or not doesn't apply, then it is classified as an asset acquisition. Now, what's the difference between the accounting as per business combination and the asset acquisition? Accounting under business combination, as we know, is as per acquisition method. Whereas if see the asset acquisition, it will be more by allocating the cost on, say, realizable fair value basis. Then intangible assets and goodwill are recognized. There's rise to goodwill and bargain purchase, whereas here in the asset acquisition, there's no goodwill and there's no bargain purchase as well. Whatever is the gain loss is transferred to P&L. Transaction costs are expensed. Here it is particularly capitalized if the particular asset is allowed to capitalize in that specific. If it's not specific, then it's charged to P&L. Then comes the deferred tax element, recognized on assets and liabilities, not recognized unless specific circumstances apply. Contingent consideration, there's a specific guidance which gives that it should be recognized as part of the consideration on the acquisition date, whereas there is no guidance available for the asset acquisition, and generally whatever is payable is recorded as a consideration. Measurement period. Now the standard Ind AS 103 gives a buffer, we say, for a 1 year period from, say, the provisional amounts freeze till 1 year, that the company can make adjustments to the values that are determined for takeover, whereas in asset acquisition there is no such case. Then coming to identify the acquirer. Generally the acquirer being the straightforward case where we easily understand that the one who is transferring the cash or incurring the liability is the acquirer, right? The standard gives the definition as the entity that obtains control, the one who has the ability to exercise control or exercise or take care of various activities of the investee is the one who is the acquirer. Now, there's a case where you see there's a reverse acquisition paragraph which is provided in Ind AS 103, which we will take up later on, where the definition of acquirer is something which might get confusing. So, the acquirer identification is also one of the important aspects. Now, one who has, as we just discussed, like the one who transfers cash or combination affected primarily by exchanging equity interests, the entity which issues the equity or the voting rights, say the entity whose owners as a group retain or receive the largest portion of the voting rights. Then the governing body, composition of the governing body. In that case, the entity whose owners have the ability to appoint or remove a majority of members is the one which is the acquirer. Relative size. The entity whose size is significantly greater than that of the other combining entities, maybe based on the size. So these are just certain illustrative examples which can be considered while determining the acquirer. Where there are more than two entities involved, the entity that initiates the combination would be considered. A new entity is formed altogether. So in that case, if the entity is formed to issue the equity instruments, one of the existing combining entity is the acquirer, where if new entity transfers cash, the new entity may be the acquirer. Coming to the third step being I'm going a little faster because these are some basic concepts. If you want me to be a bit slow, please let me know. And then determine the acquisition date. So this concept of acquisition date has come in place in Ind AS 103, where there was a huge confusion earlier as to which date is the accounting for this merger or amalgamation needs to take place. Now, the standard describes the acquisition date as date on which acquirer obtains the control over the acquiring. Now, generally, the date is when the legal transfer of asset and liabilities takes place, and maybe the consideration is transferred, generally referred as the closing date. Now, there are certain clarifications in the ITFG which are issued, which says that the appointed date, as approved in the order by the NCLT, would be considered as the acquisition date. Now, acquisition date is generally mentioned as part of the scheme of the merger or whatever is the transaction. So, this was cleared in one of the ITFG. The next is where the scheme has approved a particular date which is different. If the NCLT approves the scheme with a different appointed date as compared to the acquisition date as per Ind AS 103, then the acquisition date, appointed date as approved by the NCLT would take place as the final date for the purpose of the business combination effect in the financial statements. Then MCA had also come up with the clarification which says that appointed date identified under the scheme equal to the acquisition date. So the point here is that whatever is mentioned in the order and whatever is the scheme which clarifies the acquisition date is the date which needs to be considered as a date of control transfer or date where the accounting needs to be done. Now, asset transfer and equity transfer issued by the consideration are fair valued on the same date, on the acquisition date. For cases where the appointed date shall be deemed acquisition date, would be the case where asset acquired and consideration paid needs to be determined on the appointed date. Now, for say common control business transaction, this may be debatable as the control is already there in a common control transaction. So the date where the control is obtained is something which is debatable, like it's already there. So the date is one which there is part of the NCLT order or the scheme. Coming to the fourth step, which is the identifiable assets acquisition and the liabilities that are assumed. Now, typically the assets and liabilities which are taken over are recorded at fair value, which are on the acquisition date. So what assets would be recognized is something which meets the definition, and liability which meets the definition as given in the framework as on the date of acquisition, and as part of exchange, and which are included as a part of exchange in the business combination. Now, the classification here is that once the assets and liabilities which are going to be taken over are measured and then are recognized, they need to be classified as per the applicable Ind AS. Like, for example, if there are certain investments into some shares, then these particular investments may be classified, say, a fair value through P&L or fair value through OCI, or maybe at deemed cost as the company might have opted in accordance with relevant standards. Right. So that designation has to be done on the acquisition date, considering the economic conditions, contractual terms, operating and accounting policies. Now, these designations may be different from the one which are there of the acquirer. Now, there are certain exceptions which are given in the standard, which is the leases. Now, the lease which was there earlier as part of the acquiree's books may not necessarily be valid for the acquirer. They may or may not be taken. So it reads it needs to be checked at the inception date, at the same time at the acquisition date. Now, acquirer's classification and designation, the classification of a contract on a insurance contract. So insurance contract, again, there's a separate standard which needs to be followed. Then coming to intangible assets, while there is transfer of assets and liabilities, there are certain assets which are not recorded but are necessary to be recorded, as it forms a significant part of the assets or the value of the purchase consideration which is paid. Now, so if in case there is some brand name or something which is essential, so the manner of accounting would depend on so for it's if in case it's intangible asset, whether that meets the contractual legal criteria, meaning is there a particular contract for which defines that asset to take place, and whether it is separately identifiable as compared to any other intangible, and there is no prohibition for exchanging or using that information. In that case, a separate identifiable intangible is considered as part of the net assets taken over, and the impact will definitely go to the goodwill, which is, say, a net gain or loss on the acquisition. Correct. Then, as we earlier discussed, now the standard gives 1 year provisional period to carry out certain adjustments. Now, if you see the acquisition date, on the acquisition date, the company determines the provisional amounts determined. These are usually there as part of the scheme. Yes, there are certain caveats in the scheme. Like, for example, whether there are any events which might take after the acquisition date, whether these events existed at the whether the facts and the circumstances of that event existed on the acquisition date, then of course we follow the retrospective of impact, and then the goodwill will be adjusted accordingly, and these are pushed back, and the qualifying amounts would be pushed back, and the provisional amounts would be updated here. Now, coming to, say, these adjustments are such that these are like change in estimate or something which has to be given impact prospectively. Then the provisional amounts remain untouched and they are not updated retrospectively. Coming to, say, so after the post 1 year period, this is the 1 year period. Now, post 1 year period, if there is anything new that is identified, then business combination accounting cannot be changed. No goodwill adjustment, except if there is any error, then we have to follow Ind AS 10 Ind AS 8, which means you have to retrospectively update and give disclosure of the previous year opening balance sheet and specify the fact that there was an error, or no remeasurement of equity items. So usually this may impact P&L. Okay, and this would generally include contingent consideration, where based on the facts, if the particular contingency or the uncertainty event has turned out to be true or false, depending on that, there would be certain adjustments, but that would go to P&L and not to the main entry of business combination. Now, apart from this asset and liability, which are measured at fair value on the acquisition date, we have certain exceptions which are given in the standard, like the contingent liabilities as part of recognition exception, the measurement exception, say reacquired rights, share-based payment awards, and assets held for sale. Assets held for sale, so we will be discussing these in detail. Just for this asset held for sale, it's similar. So it's not valued at fair value on the acquisition date, but basically cost to sell, fair value NRV on the date of acquisition, which is as per 105 India standard, right? Coming to the exception where recognition measurement exceptions both are considered, income taxes. Now, then comes the employee benefit. Employee benefit, again, where whatever provisional amounts that needs to be accounted, uh, guidance is drawn from relevant standard, which is Ind AS 19. and lastly is the indemnification assets. Now moving to contingent liabilities. Ind AS 37 prescribes accounting for contingent liability. Contingent liability being a present obligation that arises of past event but is not recognized because it's not probable. Probable in the sense it's not going, there's no certainty that the amount would be paid. And the obligation is not, there's no evidence or some document which gives a reliable measure for the same. So in that case, contingent liability as per Ind AS 37 is generally disclosed. Now, as per Ind AS 103, a contingent liability, if has a present obligation, okay, on the acquisition date and fair value can be reliably measured, in that case, it has to be recognized. Recognized in the sense net assets as part of the net assets taken over, recognized even if the economic benefits is not probable. Uncertainty, uh, whatever uncertainty is there is factored as part of the fair value. So whatever maybe the risk factor that we consider as part of the contingent liability obligation. So accordingly, this will have impact on the goodwill or the capital reserve which comes as part of the business combination entry. Coming to this is deferred tax on acquisition. Now, deferred tax on the differences which arise as on the date of acquisition, the fair value of assets and liabilities are compared with their tax base. If there's any deferred tax on these on that date, that is recorded as part of the assets and liabilities taken over. Accordingly, it will have impact on the goodwill. Okay, suppose the assets are not fair valued, okay, not recognized on initial recognition of goodwill, but then in that case we don't consider the difference. But the fair, if on the acquisition date, as the standard requires to fair value, definitely there would be an impact on account of the deferred tax which needs to be considered on all the net assets that are taken over. At the same time, goodwill would be impacted. Now, we have a small case study here. So, company A acquired company B for 50 crore. The fair value of the identifiable assets and the liabilities of company B was rupees 25 crore. On acquisition, intangible asset on brand name is not recognized in the books and the value is 5 crore. Tax base of intangible asset was nil. Assume book base, tax base of all the other assets are the same. What is the deferred tax amount, net assets, and goodwill to be recognized on the date of acquisition? So the deferred tax amount here would be nothing. We can have the answers in the chat box. So if we have to calculate the deferred tax amount here, it would be more of the assets taken over on which we can assume a tax rate of say 30%. I think I'll give this answer because I think it requires some calculation. Okay, so a taxable temporary difference of 5 crore exists at the date of acquisition, right? Because this particular, and then the deferred tax liability would be 1.5 crore, assuming that the tax rate is 30%. Okay, and say the net assets at the date of acquisition therefore would be 25 minus 1.5 crore. That would come to 23.5 crore. And the lastly, the goodwill would be impacted by the deferred tax amount. And the acquisition, so that the goodwill would be 50 crore minus 23.5, which is 25 crore being the acquisition date fair value of the assets minus 1.5 crore, which is the deferred tax liability that we calculated. So the goodwill would be ultimately impacted. Coming to the exception on reacquired rights. So, reacquired rights basically is related to any rights as part of the contractual agreements, say using of trade name or something like that. So, these assets recognize these intangible assets if the right is, granted to the acquiree for use by the acquirer. To use is granted by the acquiree to the acquirer, and therefore that right has to be accounted. So based on the remaining, if particular if this right to use these rights is given for, say, based on some contract for a particular term, then that term has to be considered for the balance period where it will be used. So that fair value as on the date would be recognized for the business combination, and subsequently that balance period would be, the amount would be amortized over the balance contractual period. So based on the terms of the contract, any gain or loss on the acquisition date fair value would be recognized. Just give a small example here. Now, Company Q granted 5-year license to Company S to use Company Q's technology at fixed annual fee. S is able to cancel the license agreement by paying a fee of 2 million. Now, 2 years into the agreement, Q acquires S for INR 100 million. On that date, fair value of the license agreement is 4.5. Includes 0.5 relating to value of expected renewals. The terms of license agreement are unfavorable to Company Q when compared to market terms by 1.5 million. So, for example, the settlement loss on the date of acquisition, which will be recorded, would be something. Let's see, if I have a cancellation termination fee which is of 2 million, and whereas I can continue with pricing of 1.5 million, whichever less I will go for that. So, the settlement loss of 1.5 million will be something which I have to record, and then consideration transferred would include 100 million minus the 1.5 million on the settlement loss which is recorded on the business combination date. And then a reacquired asset would be recorded at initial measurement of the reacquired right to use that technology would be at the fair value, which is 4.5 minus 0.5 million of the expected renewal cost, right? So the revised fair value of 4 million. Coming to the next. Yeah. So share-based payments is another exception. So here what needs to be understood is whether the acquirer has an obligation to replace the acquiree's share-based payment as per the contractual agreement or the business combination agreement that is entered into. If that is not the case, then it can be treated as a new share-based payment transaction in the books of the acquirer, and Ind AS 102 can be followed, and whatever is the market-based measure or the compensation post-combination compensation expenditure that can be charged to P&L, relatively the other impact will go to the other equity as a separate ESOP reserve. Okay. Now, if suppose the agreement says that it requires the replacement of the share-based transactions of the acquiree, then this replacement is again treated as a modification under Ind AS 102. So what has done is the whole measure, the market-based measure of the share-based payment is split into two cases. One is like before, as on the date of uh, the acquisition, what is the consideration that requires to be paid, and the balance would be going to P&L as a normal share-based payment transaction which occurs. Now, how do we do that? If we see on the acquisition date, measure the acquirer's share-based payment are measured based on market-based measure, and then when the acquiree's share-based payment is measured, out of that, we find out the buyout of pre-combination share-based payment amount, and the post combination services and any excess value. So the buyout portion as on the acquisition date will go as a consideration transferred as on the business for the business combination entry, and the balance would go as post combination compensation expense as in normal accounting as per Ind AS 102. Okay, so this is explained here. Now, how do we determine this buyout portion of pre-combination share-based payment transaction? So, there is a formula which the standard provides, which states that, say, the market-based share of the acquiree as on the date of acquisition is multiplied by the ratio of proportion of vesting period completed. So the vesting period, say, is for a particular year and is completed as on the date of acquisition divided by the total vesting period or the original vesting period of the acquiree share-based payment transaction, whichever is greater. This we can go here, and this can be better explained in this paragraph, this screen. Say this is the timeline where we have the original grant date here, the acquisition date, and the original vesting date, and the new vesting date if the company has determined, right? Acquirer company. Now the vesting period, if we see the original vesting period as the acquiree had decided, okay, and the portion completed as on the acquisition date, the total vesting period would be from the original grant date till the new vesting date. Okay, now the buyout period for pre-combination share-based payment would be determined based on the market-based measure of share-based payment, that's the market fair value on the date of acquisition multiplied by the portion of vesting period completed. So the period between the original grant date till the acquisition date, whatever portion is completed, divided by the total vesting period or the original vesting period which the acquiree had, whichever is greater is considered to get the ratio of the portion where for which the consideration will be paid by the acquiree. So this particular amount which is determined is nothing but the part of the consideration which will be considered as the transfer of this share based payment, and then it will impact our goodwill. Coming to the indemnification assets. So typically these are cases where, say, the acquiree has some contingent liability for which it wants to indemnify the acquirer. In that case, there is some guarantee given by the third vendor as well. Okay, so it's part of an agreement where, if say the acquirer has to bear certain expenditure that would be indemnified by the acquiree with obviously with respect to this business combination. Now, that could be related to any tax uncertainty or employee entitlements or any provisional, any uncertain amount which may come up. So, in this case, the indemnified liability, which is there as part of the asset and liability taken over, the same amount of fair value of indemnification asset is recorded on the same date itself. If suppose this indemnified liability forms part of the contingent liabilities and is not recorded, then in that case indemnification will also be not recorded. Indemnification asset will also be not recorded. But every time this has to be evaluated. Then come to the last one, which is the fifth step, which is the non-controlling interest measurement. Now, so under IGAAP, we are used to something which is on the date of acquisition, whatever is the share, equity share, that was the one which we used to recognize as the minority interest. Now, under Ind AS 103, there are two options given. One is we either record it at fair value or we record it as proportionate share of assets and liabilities. Okay, now if there are any warrants or call options at times mentioned in the agreement, then of course Reliance is placed to Ind AS 32 and Ind AS 109, and they are recorded at fair value. So we can just take up a example for this. Now, company A pays 800 for 80% interest in company B. Company A does not have any previously held equity interest in B. The fair value of company B's identifiable net assets is estimated to be 750. Using the valuation technique, fair value of the remaining 20% in company B on the NCI, the non on the acquisition date is determined to be 180 million. What are the options for NCI measurement? So here it will be simple. Say 800. I just quickly present. So the cash consideration is 800 under fair value model. So NCI is at 20%. Sorry, the fair value is as whatever is determined by the valuation report, which will be 118 here. And in case if the company wants to go for say percentage of NCI, percentage of identifiable net assets, then 20% of this 800 would be 150. So the total here would be 980, and here would be the 950 as the total consideration. Now the fair value of 100% of identifiable assets in both the cases is 750, which is given here. Now goodwill here would be 230 and goodwill here would be 200. So depending on the option that we choose, whether to value it at fair value or based on the proportionate amount, the goodwill amount uh, will get impacted, right? So the recognized amount of NCI, as we just discussed, 180 and 150 in both the situations. Coming to the next step is step 6 on determining the consideration transferred. Now the consideration transferred is basically on the acquisition date the fair value of the assets that are transferred, the fair value of the liabilities, and the equity interest issued by the acquirer to the acquiree, right? Now, so the carrying value may differ from the fair value definitely, and at the same time there is some any contingent consideration that needs to be taken care of, and acquisition related costs are generally transferred to P&L and not forming part of the main business combination accounting, right? So they are charged to statement of profit and loss, then remain within the combined entity after business combination. Now the ones which are transferred to the acquiree rather than the former owners. Now, remeasure the fair value as on the acquisition date and recognize the gain or loss in P&L, right? Then, if suppose they are not, so if these do not remain with the business combination entry after the business combination, then we pass this particular remeasurement accounting. And if suppose they form part of the business combination transfer, then in that case these assets are carried at carrying amount immediately before acquisition date. In that case, no gain or loss is transferred in the P&L. Then purchase consideration transferred would actually include the contractual purchase price plus any adjustments for transaction which do not form part of the business combination, or which are say contingent consideration, all those cases which needs to be adjusted, all those, and then finally we get the consideration transferred in exchange for the acquiring. The remuneration for employees of former owners of future services, the remuneration part, then the reimbursement of any of the acquiree or former for paying any acquisition related costs, all these would generally not form part of the contractual purchase price. Replacement replace so it would, so for example the acquisition costs reimbursement would definitely not form part, and then whatever is settlement of pre-existing relationship that needs any adjustments or any intercompany transactions in that case, or replacement of the share based awards as we just discussed, and the contracts that acquire shares from non-selling shareholders. Okay, So all these adjustments given together give the final consideration. Coming to the contingent consideration, uh, now, so basically a contingent consideration is the obligation of the acquirer to transfer additional assets uh, apart from the normal purchase consideration, cash or equity that is agreed if some uncertain event occurs on a particular date. Now, so the typically the accounting here is that recognize and measure at fair value on the acquisition date and impacts the goodwill, and subsequently it requires application of relevant standard under Ind AS 32 and then fair value through P&L. Equity in case if it is liability, in if it is identified as equity, then it is not remeasured. Let's see this particular case study. Now here acquirer company has acquired 100% share capital of target company. For the acquisition, account AC is required to pay immediate consideration of 5 million. In addition, the acquisition involves additional payment of 1 million after 1 year if EBITDA increases by 1 year in the first year exceeds 2 million. An additional payment of 0.5 million after 2 years if EBITDA for the second year following acquisition exceeds 2.2 million. Now, the two payments that are conditional upon EBITDA targets are contingent consideration. At the date of acquisition, fair value of the two payments was 8 lakh. So, what would be the transaction? So, here the cash paid for the consideration is agreed as 5 million. Now, the contingent consideration fair value is 8 lakh. So, the total amount of purchase consideration is 5.8 lakh, and classification for based on the definition of Ind AS 32 would be financial liability. It's going to be settled by way of cash. Okay, so it's a financial liability, and therefore it will be subsequently adjusted. Adjustment would be at subsequent measurement and adjustment would be at fair value through P&L. Now, cost of business combination, generally we know it goes to P&L. However, there are certain clarifications here. Let's see the cost related to various finders fees or advisory legal accounting. If it is related to acquisition of business, they are expensed except for cost of issue of shares, which forms part of the reserves. Okay. Now, acquisition of business by purchasing shares resulting in a control in a consolidated financials, it will be expensed again and again. The cost of issue of shares would form part of the reserves. It will be netted off with the reserves. Now, in standalone financials, where you have investment in a particular entity that you record it at fair value through P&L, in that case, again, it will be expense. But where investment is measured at cost, in that case, it will be added to that investment. These expenses, in say in relation to amalgamation or demerger, can be amortized over a period of 5 years under the income tax. Coming to last one, which is the recognition and measurement of goodwill. So as we just said, consideration transferred and then add amount of NCI that we just saw, add fair value of previously held equity interests if any, and less the net assets, fair value of the net assets acquired and liabilities assumed would give the goodwill or the bargain purchase amount. This amount is something would be separately recorded. Say goodwill or bargain purchase in that case is recorded as capital reserve. So goodwill is recognized as a separate asset. It is not amortized unless in like until in AS 14 when we used to amortize it over maximum of 5 years. This is not the case under Ind AS 103. It is tested for impairment based on the CGU criteria. Whether the CGU here is based on the business segments that the company decides, and based on that the impairment model is tested, and it is so this goodwill is not amortized through the useful life, right? Then coming to the gain on bargain purchase. So generally a gain of bargain purchase doesn't arise in a situation, so the company is required to double check, and then even if there are certain clear evidence available, then in that case it will be charged to OCI, and then from there it will move on to capital reserve. In case there is no clear evidence as to why is that bargain purchase coming, in that case directly we transfer to other equity as capital reserve. So there's a difference as compared to IFRS 3. Now IFRS 3 says that this gain on bargain purchase is recognized directly in P&L, whereas in our case we under Ind AS 103 we transfer it to capital reserve. Now lastly, coming to the common control business combination, as we just understood like initially, that a common control is nothing but where entities have ultimately ultimately same controlling party before and after the combination, and there is no and the control is not transitory, meaning it's not temporary, right? So accounting of common control transaction is done as per pooling of interest method, which was done in the IGAP accounts. Now it's similar, but there are certain clarifications given. So assets and liabilities acquired are taken at book value. Any expenses are written off immediately to P&L, and accounting policies can be harmonized, uh, but no other adjustments. The reserves will have the same identity. The reserves are also forming part of the assets and liabilities which are taken over, and any difference which arises between the net assets that are taken over and the share capital or the consideration paid is generally transferred to capital reserve, and the comparative amounts are restated as if the business combination had taken place at the beginning of the earliest period. So, for example, if the business combination has affected in, say, 2021 financial year, then the opening would be March 20 and opening would be 1st April 20. So, just to clarify this, so company acquired control in company B on 10th April 2018. The company became subsidiary of company on that day. So 10th April 20, a court scheme was filed. The court order was received in 10th March 2021. So in this case, acquisition date is the date when the control was established. That is nothing but 10th April 18. However, as per Appendix C, that is the Common Control Business Acquisition Guidance, the business combination will be accounted on 1st April 2019. Okay, in the year ended, so this is the opening balance, and then for the year ended financial year 31st March 21 when the order was received. So the year in which the order was received, the financial statements were updated with opening balance sheet in the, so in that particular year you will have three columns. One is the 1st April 19, 31st March 20 and 31st March 21. In accounting challenges in common control, so there has been various queries which have on and off received in this common control cases. So there are certain clarifications also issued by ICI on the ITFG bulletin. So let's just go through a few of them. That is, say accounting treatment is not prescribed in the court scheme at all. However, the Companies Act requires that the court scheme prescribes the accounting policy, and the chartered accountant or the auditor has to certify that accounting treatment. But in any case where the accounting treatment is not prescribed, this usually doesn't happen because there is clause which caps this. But in case if so, then the accounting to be accounted as per Ind AS 103 and prior period information to be restated. So normal follow Ind AS 103, irrespective of whether it was accounting under previous GAAP. Okay, now the accounting treatment is prescribed in the court approved scheme. The prior period information need not be restated. Entity shall follow as prescribed in the scheme. So say for example, Ind AS is not implemented and now it's implemented. As per provisions of Ind AS, whatever is the like opening balance sheet and all those 3 years need to be followed. So the accounting treatment is different as compared to accounting treatment. The scheme is different as compared to the standard. Then the scheme overrides the accounting treatment that would otherwise require to be followed. So then the court order will prevail in that case. So here the restatement of prior period financial information in case of before the date of transition to Ind AS. So in this case, say the transaction it was entered before Ind AS was adopted, and the scheme got approved by the court uh, with a treatment which is different from Ind AS 103. Now, how do we do whether restatement is required? So it has to be evaluated upon the transition, and whether based on the evaluated under the law, the scheme approved by the relevant does not preclude from transitioning to Ind AS. There are certain clauses in the court order which preclude from using Ind AS accounting. In that case, we apply the account. So basically the whole idea is to follow whatever is given in the NCLT order as approved. Correct. Then transaction entered before the adoption of Ind AS scheme is approved by the NCLT or the court differs from the 103 as similar. The council again had made an announcement that wherever there is such case, a description of the accounting treatment, the reason, the difference between the accounting, this disclosure is required. And then wherever there is a common control transaction in such an issue, uh, the obligation to pay the consideration should be recognized as a liability at the end of the comparative year end in case if it is not paid. Okay, and presuming that the fixed, so the number would be fixed, so share spending issuance or something like that nomenclature can be given. And definitely the impact on EPS, so include as part of the weighted average number of shares, it would be included for the purpose of calculating the EPS. Now lastly is the reverse acquisition. So just to quickly explain, reverse acquisition are usually entered by companies uh, to it's basically who is the acquirer and acquiree is something which needs to be determined. Entity that issues the securities is generally the acquirer, right? Uh, like quickly, if I have to explain you by this example, see, A issues shares to acquire B, listed entity A, okay, and it issues shares to unlisted entity B, and shareholders of B control the business post acquisition. Shareholder of B control. Okay, although A has issued shares to B, okay, but control is exercised by shareholders of B. Now, why is this case? So, B is an unlisted company and it intends to say become public entity, but does not want to wants its shares to get listed. To accomplish that, it say arranges a public entity to acquire its equity interest in exchange. So in that case, after acquisition, the shareholder of B holds 60% of equity interest in entity A. Also, uh, the directors are resigned and were replaced by B because B wants to control the uh, have the control over the business, right? So whether the 103 transaction would apply, so here it is clear that see, even though shares are issued by A, the entity A is not the acquirer in this case. Entity B would be the acquirer. Entity A would be identified as acquiree for accounting purpose, and entity B would be identified as acquirer for the accounting purpose. So in that case, what are the indicators? The former shareholders of the entity own majority of the shares and control majority of the votes in the combined entity. So basically the control, if the who has the control over the entity is something which needs to be evaluated. Now for the accounting of the acquirer, not restated from the combination of carrying amounts, and the from accounting of the acquiree, recognized and measured in accordance with the Ind AS 103 that we usually do. Great. Lastly, the disclosures. I think I'll be completing quite faster and you will have a good Sunday evening. So the disclosures are basically very exhaustive. I tried to put in some basic details which need to be considered. So the name, description of the acquiree, acquisition date, percentage of voting interest, reasons for the combination, how the control was, how acquirer obtained the control, acquisition date, fair value of the total consideration transferred, and qualitative description of goodwill recognized and the bargain purchase, any whatever the capital reserve account has been impacted, and description and amount of the transaction, giving the accounting what exactly is accounted for the transaction, contingent considerations that has been considered based on the scheme, and the indemnification, assets recognized, then acquisition related cost details based on the line item in the P&L where it is impacting related expense, and acquisition date, fair value of the equity interest, goodwill amount and its impairment, how is that evaluated, giving all the facts, exchange differences, reconciliation of that, all those things. These are exhaustive disclosures, uh, and there are few more which I tried to summarize in this slide. And there, if we can take up the questions if you have any. Do we have any questions?
मैडम अभी तक कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं आया, किसी ने कोई क्वेश्चन पोज नहीं किया.
Yes. Please post in your questions in the chat box. We can discuss those.
Even participant can unmute their self and
Yes.
pose question. Yeah.
Hello, are there any questions? I'll just check the chat box.
Rajnish, it seems there is no question.
Yeah, okay, sir. Okay, Shivbhagan, sir. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Rajnish Sharma. I'm Managing Committee member of Thane branch and Chairman of current Vikasa team. It is my pleasure that I got the opportunity to give a vote of thanks, formal vote of thanks to Madam. So, Kaku Madam, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation on Ind AS 103. Frankly, I also attended for half an hour and I really gained a good knowledge. And thank you to the Thane staff, staff of Thane branch. Thank you to Shivbhagan sir and Vice Chairman Swapnil sir. And thank you to all the attendees for participating in this session. Thank you very much.